Hello and welcome to Midlife Meltdown. I'm Ian, and in today's video I'm going to talk about the specific playbook that narcissists use when love bombing a potential future supply. And the reason I want to talk about this is there are plenty of videos out there around what love bombing is and how it's used to secure supplies. What I'm curious to see, and from my experience, is that the actions used by the narcissist are very repetitive and very specific and help give some insight into how the narcissists operate and why we should see that behaviour as not normal, and hopefully help free ourselves from the feeling that narcissists may be just damaged people or maybe normal people acting in a very specific way, and hopefully free yourself from that kind of narcissistic trap and help pull that mask off. So if you're not sure what love bombing is, effectively it's the overt actions, the overt emotions that narcissists use when they find a new source of supply to really ensnare that person, to make that person feel special very, very quickly, so they become completely in admiration of the narcissist and completely ensnared in their narcissistic world. Those actions can range from overloading the new supply with compliments, with admiration, to make them feel very special very quickly. Similarly to overload with very quick, very overt sexual behaviour to make them feel very special and very wanted, by the narcissist. And very commonly an oversharing of emotional stories, of emotional hooks, as I like to call them, very early on to make them feel like the narcissist is opening up to them and only to them, and that they're a very special person, that the narcissist is willing to share these stories. And some of those stories may be genuine. In examples that I've seen in my ex, a lot of those stories, a lot of the time, are fake. But ultimately the aim is to make the supply, the target, feel extremely special, that they're something unique and special to the narcissist. Now, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you should recognize some of those actions, as it's likely that in the early stages that you were love bombed and those actions were applied to you to make you feel special and to bring you into that relationship very quickly and under control. And in my case, all three of those were applied. And what's really interesting to me is the details behind the actions that were done to me as I found out more about my ex's attempts at securing new supplies, at other relationships. The details around those actions follow a very specific pattern. And why I find that so interesting is if you're in the stage of what I would call stage 2 of trying to understand, having the awareness of narcissistic personality disorder, hopefully seeing those patterns and finding out how repetitive they are will help break that illusion that you were somehow special. And actually what you're dealing with is someone who literally has a playbook that when they want to secure a new supply, they just get out and repeat exactly the same actions over and over. And those are actions that they've proven to have worked for them in the past. So in my situation, as I look back almost 20 years now and look at the very early love bombing stage of my relationship with my ex, and also look at how that's been applied later on as she found the new supply in the last few years that ultimately broke our relationship and allowed me to escape that narcissistic relationship. The types of activity, the types of examples, the actions that she took are pretty much exactly the same. And in a way that really helped me understand and see and break the illusion that the behaviour was so repetitive that as I recognise it, I'm like, I've been through this before, and it caused me a lot of pain in the early stage of our relationship. And it was so similar to the late stage of our relationship that I couldn't help but break that illusion and think that this is just a repetition. So when I look at the example of my relationship and I look back at the very early stages, almost 20 years ago now when I met my ex, the actions that she took were very specific and were then repeated later on. So she came to this country with a boyfriend, and she wasn't from this country. They came to the UK together. And when I met them and I started kind of hanging out with them as friends, very early on, the discussion around her boyfriend became, almost that he was slightly abusive, that he was, not a great person, that he used to drink a lot, that he didn't treat her very well, that he ignored her a lot. And when I look at how that played through when she found the new supply over the last couple of years, that's a very similar message that he was getting, that I was, a slightly ignorant husband, that I wasn't making her feel special, that I was having affairs. The repetition, that building of that narrative was exactly the same. And actually looking back at it now, although I didn't do anything bad, I ensured that they had separated their previous relationship before I engaged in any relationship with my ex. Looking back at it now, I believed the story, but actually, if I think back to her boyfriend who I knew, I think he was actually quite a nice guy, and I don't believe that narrative now, but at the time I did, because I guess I was extremely naive. I was probably a bit lonely, and I wanted to believe that story. And in the same way that her new supply now is probably exactly like I was then, is going through the same thing, that believes this narrative, that love bombing, this affection that they're getting just makes you want to believe it. You want to believe that you're special to this person and that you're what they need. But the second action I found out about with a new supply with my ex that happened with me when I first met her was that during the courtship, effectively, before we had started a relationship, that she had asked me to take her swimming to a local swimming pool. And I didn't really think much of it. I liked swimming at the time. I used to swim quite competitively. And I took her to a local pool, and it was a kind of fun pool, not a really serious swimming pool. But I didn't really think much of it. But what I found out is a few years ago, as she was trying to attract a new supply and trying to secure a new supply, that she had done the same thing with them, and it was a much younger man, but effectively that she had tried really hard while they were away on business to try and get him, amongst others, to go to a swimming pool. And I think the whole point of that really is to advertise the goods, as it were, is to put yourself on display. But it was a really uncanny thing that almost 20 years apart, that the same activity is still going on, and it's still, again, pulling out the playbook, pulling out which activities work and going through the same behaviour. And it's the same thing with overtly sexual behaviour. And I was a slightly naive young man, and I hadn't had a lot of girlfriends. I had a couple of serious girlfriends, but when I met my ex and we started a relationship, it became sexual very quickly and was very overt on her behalf. I mean, she took control of it and moved it on very, very quickly. And I found out since that's a common trait that had happened through her teenage years as well. As I'd met some of her exes and friends and talked to them, that was very common behaviour, that was kind of known. And as I found out, much as I didn't want to find out some of the details of her new supply, I learned that exactly the same thing had happened, and it had happened within, a day, within a day of it kind of being confirmed, that it had become very sexual very quickly. And it's those kind of repeat behaviours. Again, again, I don't want to go into the details of exactly what I found out and what kind of happened, but the approach, the method, the manipulation to get there is ridiculously specific and ridiculously repetitive, despite there being an almost 20-year gap between it. It's just pure learned behaviour. And then the last specific example that I'd seen of love bombing that was very, very similar, despite it being 20 years apart in my example, was the emotional hooks that had dropped in communication. So I'd seen a couple of emails that had passed between my ex and her new supply, and looking back and comparing what I remember about the emails that we had exchanged very early on, they were extremely similar. So, things like just leaving little suggestive comments in there, which doesn't seem that specific, but particularly mimicking what the person likes and trying to latch on to specific things like music, to movies, interests that I know that she doesn't have, but was replicating based on what she thought I had at the time, and now based on what the new supply has. I mean, also things like opening up very, very personal stories within early communication around sort of family members and, activities that were happening or not happening, whether it was made up at the time, just trying to drop very deep emotional content in very early communications, as well as trying to mimic and mirror behaviour that she thought that I wanted at the time, or that her new supply now wants, is a very similar trait, and it's extremely specific. And it was really shocking to me to see the same behaviour happening from someone who's 20 years older, and it being a 20-year gap between when it happened before. And that makes me think this is just something they go to when they want to go through this behaviour again. When they want to source a new supply, they get out the playbook again and they go through the very specific activity that's been proven to work and reenact it again. This isn't new behaviour they're going through. It isn't impulsive behaviour that's just thought up on the spot. This is very well rehearsed, and it's very well proven for them. And as far as what's the point in this video, there are no new revelations in there. It's really just to highlight that If you look back in your own situation, if you go back to the early stages of your narcissistic relationship and look at the love bombing stage, and if you know anything about, if you've been discarded, if you know anything about behaviour post-in, if you can match the two up, then hopefully realising that there's a pattern there, that this is very specific, it wasn't just isolated to you, will help you break that illusion and understand that you're dealing with someone who's got a repeat pattern of behaviour. So to remove that mask from the narcissist, to understand that, and as horrible as it sounds, that you're not unique and you really weren't that special to the narcissist, that you were just another victim, you were another source of supply, and they used the same tactics on you that they'd probably used in the past, and even if you were the first, they've probably used since and they'll use again. And I've seen examples in my own life of people repeating this behaviour into their 70s, into their 80s, and it doesn't change. And the point of this video is to try and highlight you, and as horrible and as bitter as that pill is to swallow, is just to realise that you are just another source of supply to the narcissist. And the quicker you can understand that and go through that pain, the quicker you can start to go on and live a healthy, happy life. Maybe meet someone new who treats you with respect, who values you in the true way that someone should value someone in a relationship. But the narcissist is not that person, and they're just doing to you what they've done to someone else, or that they will do to someone else in the future. And that's really it. The point of this is just to help you see the brutal reality of the situation, help you break any cycle of denial that you might be in, because that's a dangerous trap that can take up years of your life. And really the only secret to love bombing is to understand and see that you have been love bombed, and that it's a process that's repetitive. It's not unique to you. You weren't special, and the next person they do it to isn't special either. It's a tactic to make you feel special, and that works horribly well, but ultimately is false and is there to ensnare you. So I'll end this short video there. If there's anything more you'd like me to cover on love bombing, or anything you'd like me to cover more on the specifics of my situation, then please leave a comment in the comment section below, or get in touch with me in my email address in the description box. If you like the videos and you find them useful, then please help me grow the channel and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell, hit the like button on the video, and share it with anyone that you think may find it useful.